The rain had just started when the little girl ran barefoot across the abandoned parking lot, her tiny feet splashing through shallow puddles, her breathing sharp and frantic as though her lungs were tearing from the inside. Her worn pink backpack slapped against her back as she stumbled, forcing herself forward even as the storm grew heavier. Behind her, the echo of distant footsteps, slow, steady, predatory, filled the air with a chilling finality that made her heart twist. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to get away. When she finally collapsed under the flickering streetlight, trembling and wet, she looked up to see a large figure standing only a few feet away. A tall, silent biker with a heavy jacket, drenched from the downpour, staring at her with unreadable eyes. And in that desperate moment, with fear swallowing her whole, she whispered words no child should ever say, "Can you take her instead of me?" She pointed back toward the alley behind her, and for a moment, the world felt like it stopped. The biker said nothing. He only turned, looked toward the darkness. Then he walked forward, and took both. Backhand index pointing right. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of helping others, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to channel name. Your support means the world and helps stories like this reach more hearts. The storm only grew worse as the biker lifted the little girl into his arms. She was shaking, not just from the cold but from something deeper, something that had carved fear into her bones long before that night. The biker didn't speak, he simply wrapped his heavy jacket around her small frame and carried her toward the rusted motorcycle parked under the broken streetlight. The engine rumbled to life, echoing through the empty lot, a sound that made the girl flinch before slowly relaxing against his shoulder. He didn't ask questions. He didn't pressure her to speak. He simply drove, the rain hitting their skin like needles, his gloved hands steady on the handlebars as though guiding her through a world that had never once been gentle to her. They reached an old auto shop on the outskirts of town, a place that looked abandoned to anyone passing by, but inside held warmth, tools, blankets, and a small room where the biker lived alone, far from noise, far from people, far from everything he no longer wanted to face. He placed the girl on a chair and turned on a small heater, letting warm air slowly fill the room. She clung to her backpack like it was the only thing she owned, her eyes darting around as though expecting danger to burst through the walls at any second. The biker knelt down to her level, gently placing a mug of warm water into her hands. She didn't drink it at first, only stared at it as though unsure if she was allowed to. Hours passed before she finally spoke. The storm outside softened, the thunder rolling farther and farther away. She told him she wasn't running from someone, she was running to someone. Her little sister, barely 3 years old, was still in the alley she had come from. They had both escaped a place where they weren't loved, weren't cared for, and weren't safe. She had been living in a situation that grew darker by the day, and she had made one final, desperate decision to flee, dragging her baby sister with her. But the moment she realized someone was following them, she hid her sister inside an old bin, whispered for her to stay quiet, and ran the other direction, choosing herself as bait. And when she saw the biker appear in the rain, towering, silent, mysterious, she thought he was one of the people looking for them, until he picked her up with hands that were steady instead of violent. The biker stood, grabbed his keys again, and without a single word returned to the storm. The girl cried into her sleeves, terrified of what she might lose, silently counting seconds that felt like hours. But when the door finally swung open again, he wasn't alone. In his arms was her little sister, wrapped in his jacket, her tiny face pressed against his chest, her small hands gripping a piece of his vest as though she somehow knew she was safe. The older girl collapsed to her knees, sobbing until she could barely breathe. The biker stood there, soaked again, breathing heavily, but for the first time since she had met him, she saw softness in his eyes. The next days changed all three of their lives. The biker made sure they had warm meals, clean clothes, a soft place to rest. The girl slowly opened up, revealing stories that would make even the toughest man feel powerless with heartbreak. They had grown used to surviving, not living. Used to fear, not protection. Used to being ignored, not seen. The biker listened in silence, but inside he felt something he thought he had buried years ago: responsibility. A purpose he never thought he'd have again. He wasn't a man with a clean past. He had once been a different person, surrounded by loud engines and louder mistakes. He had lived a life of roaming highways, broken relationships, and destructive choices that cost him more than he ever admitted. He had walked away from the world believing he was unworthy of being needed by anyone. But these two girls, they didn't care about his past. They were simply grateful he opened a door when the world had slammed every one of theirs shut. The biker began fixing the shop during the day while the girls watched him from the doorway. The older one, brave beyond her years, offered to help him patch walls, clean tools, and sweep floors. The younger one followed him around like a shadow, tiny hands tugging at his jeans, giggling every time he pretended not to notice her. At night, they would sit around a small table eating warm soup, listening to the rain tapping softly on the tin roof. Those moments, so quiet, so ordinary, began stitching something in their hearts and in his. But the world outside didn't forget. Rumors spread. People whispered. Someone claimed they had seen a biker taking two little girls into an old shop at night. Accusations began to surface. And soon, the authorities came looking. When the police arrived, flashing lights washing over the dusty shop walls, the older girl clutched the biker's jacket with shaking hands. They stood behind him as officers questioned him, asking who the girls were, why they were with him, and demanding explanations he had no right to give, because their stories were theirs, not his. For the first time since the night they arrived, the biker felt fear, not for himself, but for them. He had just begun to rebuild something fragile with these two children, something he didn't even have a name for yet. Would the world take them away simply because it didn't understand? The older girl stepped forward before the biker could. Her voice cracked, trembling, but full of a courage she didn't know she had. She told the officers everything. Every detail. Every wound. Every moment of despair she thought she would never escape. She spoke until she was shaking and breathless. And when she finished, she looked at the biker and said that he was the first person who had ever reached for her without wanting something in return. The officers softened. They listened. They realized the truth not because of the biker's words, but because of the girls. A caseworker was brought in soon after. Instead of ripping them apart, she worked with patience and empathy that allowed the truth to unfold naturally. Investigations showed the girls needed safety, protection, stability. Things they never had. And unexpectedly, a new question arose, one that changed everything. Would the biker consider temporary guardianship? He had no family left. No children of his own. No clean blueprint of the kind of life children should grow up in. But when he looked at the two girls, their small hands tangled with his, their eyes filled with a fragile kind of hope, he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He wanted to try. The legal process was long, complicated, filled with meetings, background checks, and evaluations. The biker fought through every step, even when it felt overwhelming, even when old wounds resurfaced. And slowly, the system began to trust him, because the girls already did. The day it became official, the older girl cried so hard she could barely stand. The younger one clung to his neck, burying her tiny face into his beard. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were nightmares, difficult memories, challenging days, and moments when the biker questioned whether he was enough. But every morning, he woke up to the sound of small footsteps, soft giggles, and two little voices calling his name. And every night, he tucked them into bed knowing that for the first time in years, he had a reason to live a life that mattered. He didn't save them. They saved him, too. And whenever people asked why he took both that night, he never gave a long answer. He simply said that no child deserved to face darkness alone, and if he had the strength to carry even one, he would carry both for as long as he could. Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Biker's Kindness so we can keep bringing powerful stories like this to the world. Your engagement truly keeps this channel alive. Sparkles, before you go, drop a comment below and tell us which part of the story moved you the most. Your words inspire us more than you know.